Hey everyone, welcome back. So this is the third and probably final for now section of this project, which is creating a virtual canvas installation, meaning an installation which can showcase multiple generative works on a virtual canvas that adds dimensionality, depth, and interactivity to the piece. So here we can look at where we left off after part 2. If you haven't checked out parts 1 and 2, I definitely recommend that you do so. We're not going to be covering any of that stuff, so make sure that you are caught up. You can find those videos on my YouTube channel to follow along for free, or you can check out my Patreon page for the project files and just get going from there. So a quick look at what we have going on. We have 2 generative scenes. We have a virtual canvas that we'll come back to. We have some post that's just a little bit of noise. And in our virtual canvas, we have a layer of turbulence. We have this tile grid geometry. We have a dust cloud that we're using for backgrounds. We have this frame that is also being used just kind of as post-processing. And then we have this cascading render pass network, which is really just rendering the, compositing our render and putting just a little bit of feedback on the dust modes. So at the beginning of this series, I said that one of the things I liked about this kind of setup is the fact that you can use it to transition between specific effects in cool and interesting ways. So, yes, you can easily transition by dragging and dropping, or, doing the classic cross and transitioning between textures. Yeah, that's fine. But it's not useful in every case. And sometimes it leaves a little bit to be desired because at the end of the day, you are just crossfading between two textures at that point, and it's pretty obvious. So something that you can do using this method, and one of the reasons that I like it, if we just copy and paste this tile geo and add an asterisk to our render field, we're just going to add another in, and we're going to use this for our second input, for our other scene. And so now we have both of these scenes rendered over top of each other, and they're in exactly the same spot, which is cool. Because it means that we can then do some handy things to kind of transition between these in fun ways. So by that, what I really mean is kind of being able to fade out, scale in, and in other ways transition from basically using like one material for the same particle system to another, which you really can't do. There's not really a way to crossfade between materials. So the way to do that is to render 2 different levels of geometry and use something called the draw priority. So the draw priority tells the rendering engine what order it should draw things in. So right now, our ordering is basically this is on top and this is underneath, so we only see it, the black and white, if the color one is turned off. Now, if I make my draw priority 1, if I make my draw priority for this tiled grid, the color one, and have this tiled grid be 0, we can actually see that now the first scene is being drawn on top. And that's interesting because it allows us to then optionally use some cool texture-based shifting between our materials. So to kind of illustrate that, we have our material over here, and we have a circle, a simple circle, and we'll make the output resolution only, and then I'll use this as A. And actually, I don't think we want that off of the base color. I do think we want it probably over here in the instancing setup. So the reason that we want that is so that we can use our set resolution to ensure that it has the same resolution as our instanced grid. We can then go into our instancing page 2 and use the alpha channel of our alpha operator as an alpha mask. Color op. Oops, I forgot to say A. Awesome. And so here, now we're starting to see some of the power of this technique. So we have this geometry, which has draw priority 0, and this geometry, which has draw priority 1. And the draw priority 0 is only being shown on top, where its alpha is 1. And so we can then do things like use a mask-based transition to be able to basically just like scrape across and determine which layer is visible on the top or the bottom. Now, there's tons of other things that you could do with this setup. This is like not even scratching the surface at all. But you know, it's probably because of the over that those are coming through. No, I guess not. Well, that's okay. If we go into scene 1, and maybe instead of having it be this noise, we make it something, well, it can still be the noise, but make it something a little bit more high contrast. So if instead of a circle, we make this a rectangle, and instead of this select, we make it a constant. We'll set the center of the circle or the rectangle to be minus 0.5. We'll make its vertical size something huge, like 5. And then what we can do is create a parameter. I'll call it wipe. And if we get these parameters up, We can use this wipe, maybe times a little bit more than 2, to now have a nice wipe fade that will go from one material to the other. We can collapse that, and what we can do is add a parameter chop. We can look up 2 levels. We can get the wipe parameter. We can add a displace and another noise, which we can transform just using abs time dot seconds times 0.01 monochrome off input 32 bit float displace 0. And then what we want is to use an S curve to go from 0 to 1 to 0.030. And then we'll use this null, and this will be our displace weight. And then the other thing that we want to do, whoops, is make this really steep and biased like this, so that we basically have a full displacement only until our wipe is at the very end, and then our displacement goes down quite a bit. And the reason for that is if we didn't have this, we could have some scenarios where we had little bits of texture that were left. We don't want that. I'm also going to add some blur to just make things a little bit smoother and real nice. And so now we have this wipe fade that goes from one side to the other. And if we don't want that wipe fade displace weight coming down quite as fast, we can do this. Okay, so that actually is looking pretty good. I'm not even sure if we need this S-curve. Oh, aha. Well, we need it for the mapping. Okay, cool. So now, let's see how this looks up here. And we have this very cool kind of receding line that's fading between these two. Now we can look at our material. We can ensure that we have blending transparency on. And so now we are seeing kind of this transparency being added along the boundary as this transition is occurring. You could do subtract if you like, or maximum or minimum. But maximum and minimum are not going to be great. So this is really what you're looking for the most part. And so now we have this nice little transition with the highlight effect. Going from image 1 to image 2, or really scene 1 to scene 2. There we have our transition, just like that. So then last thing I'm going to do here is just use an LFO, make it a pulse, turn off the play, add a filter to it, which, yeah, you may not actually want in a real installation setting, but for our purposes right now, it'll be fine. Just use that filter. I'll use a rename to rename it to white. And so now when I pulse this LFO, we get a signal. But actually what I want to do is have a count and turn that count to a loop 0, 1. And so now this will toggle between 0 and 1, and that will mean that I get a loop here. So if I pulse my LFO, oh, whoops, this should be loop min and max. And so now if I pulse my LFO, and now I'm getting a nice, oh wait, hold on. Okay, so I need to use this before I do the mapping for the rectangle, and then after I do the mapping for the displace weight. And then I will customize the component of my parent. I will call it transition. And so now I have this transition parameter that will get me a nice smooth transition from one state to the other. I just got to multiply this by 2.1. So transition, if I click this, and boom, now I have this nice animated transition from one scene to another. And you can then hit this from an extension or from a UI or really from anything. So we'll call this base alpha mask. And it's worth noting, you could definitely animate these transitions and apply them to like the scale or other aspects of the simulation that aren't just the alpha. The alpha is what's going to be this draw pick or draw priority based effect, but there are other effects obviously that you could do. So if I delete that one and just re-up it with my other effect, and I basically just did that so that I would have this transition parameter in there, draw priority of 1. Let's see what happens when I click transition. We can see that it goes away, but because this is here, there is still something, and we transition both of them away, and then we're left with 0. So what I might do is put both of these transition pulses on my parent parameter as transition 1 and 2, and then from up here I can say transition 1, transition 2, and because because this layer is below the other one, I really need to have transition 1 faded out before transition 2 can be faded in. So like now if I fade out transition 2, there's nothing. If I fade back in just transition 2, then there's this, and if I fade back in transition 1, then we have back to our original. So we can customize this component and maybe add in just this noise amplitude. Wait, but do we already have that somewhere? Where is our custom? Oh, amplitude. There it is. There we go. Awesome. Okay. So we turn this amplitude the whole way down. And yeah, now we kind of have a working effect that allows us to transition between multiple scenes, and we can do so in pretty compelling ways. So we can add some turb speed and get some more dynamism going there. And yeah, just kind of be transitioning between our different effects. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up this tutorial. It's been a good project. I hope everybody has enjoyed it. And again, just to kind of summarize what we've done, we have created an installation that takes multiple scenes, in this case generative effects, that should be anything that you want them to be, runs them through this virtual canvas that is rendered with nice mosaic tile mappings so that we can see our generative effect nicely broken up across the screen. And then applies some light post-processing, including these the dust and frame. There we go. Yeah, and then we added this mouse interactivity, which I think is pretty cool, and some other stuff. So where kind of to go from here, and how can you take this to the next level? So I think one of the ways to take this to the next level is to find some way to use the scenes and layers from the active scenes to actually control the turbulence of the scene, as well as potentially even the transition or which layer is being shown. So it's pretty cool to have these different layers and have the transitions between them, but right now all of these are separate, right? And there is not really any connection between them. We just have a mask, we're showing one layer, we're showing the other layer, whatever. So one thing that I would definitely encourage everybody who's interested to think about is how you can start to kind of bring some self-referential behavior to your program, meaning using components or layers that are already in existence and in use other places to just further integrate every component of this project into a holistic installation, and that will come across to the viewer. So yeah, I'm gonna stop here. Thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. I really appreciate it. This has been quite a year. I am very excited to see what comes next, and again, just want to thank everybody who supported me, especially those who have supported me from the beginning. So I hope everybody has enjoyed this, and I will see you all next time.